England falls short of the 1994 World Cup after a 2-0 loss to the Netherlands in Rotterdam on October 13, 1993. Graham Taylor's squad is undone by a Dennis Bergkamp strike and a controversial penalty converted by Ronald Koeman. Norway dominate the qualification table, finishing with 20 points from 10 games, while England trail in third with 13, behind both the Dutch and Norwegians, despite fielding experienced players like Chris Waddle, Tony Adams, and Paul N.J. England can't manage a consistent offensive rhythm. Taylor's tactics soften. Conservative, rigid, and reactive. England's collapse isn't sudden, it unfolds slowly, painfully. The decision to rotate captains, persist with long ball football, and sideline creative talents like Matt Letizia leads to mounting public anger. As Norway soar with Egil Olsen's direct style, and the Netherlands recover from an early stumble, England's lack of a clear identity proves fatal. Within weeks, Taylor resigns under pressure. The 1994 World Cup goes on without one of football's founding nations. On October 10, 2017, the United States men's national team loses 2-1 to Trinidad and Tobago at a stadium, officially eliminating themselves from the 2018 FIFA World Cup in the 17th minute. A freak own goal by center-back Omar Gonzalez ricochets awkwardly off his shin and loops past Tim Howard. 10 minutes later, Elvin Jones drills a 35-yard rocket into the top corner, doubling Trinidad's lead and silencing the American bench. Christian Pulisic, just 19, and already the team's brightest light, pulls one back in the 47th minute, but the team fails to break through again. Because of this three-way swing, the U.S. finishes 5th in the CONCACAF hex, marking their first missed World Cup since 1986. Head coach Bruce Arena, who returned after Jurgen Klinsmann's dismissal in late 2016, resigns within 48 hours. U.S. Soccer Federation President Galati announces he will not seek re-election following heavy backlash. On November 17, 1993, France concedes a last-minute goal to Bulgaria at the Parc des Princes, losing 2-1 and crashing out of the 1994 World Cup. Emil Kostadinov races forward and fires past Bernard Lama in the 90th minute, scoring his second goal of the match and sealing France's elimination. Ginola is scapegoated across headlines and pundit panels, with manager Hallier calling it a crime against the team because France fails to qualify. Hallier resigns days later under media and internal pressure, sparking a full reset within the French Football Federation. The collapse marks a brutal end to the international careers of Jean-Pierre Papin and Eric Cantona, both central figures in the team's attack. In the 2002 UEFA, the Netherlands ranked 6th in the world failed to qualify, despite a squad stacked with Patrick Luke, Clarence Seedorf, Edgar Davids, and a young Ruud van Nistelrooy. The Dutch finished 3rd in Group 2 behind Portugal and Ireland, recording 4 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses across 8 matches. Their fate is sealed after a decisive 1-0 defeat in Dublin on September 1, 2001, where Ireland's Jason McAteer scores the lone goal in the 68th minute. Despite Roy Keane being sent off in the first half, the Dutch can't capitalize and suffer a damaging loss that puts qualification out of reach. Earlier, a 2-2-0 defeat in Lisbon against Portugal adds further pressure to a campaign already riddled with tactical inconsistency and dropped points. The Netherlands score 17 goals in the group but allow too many critical moments to slip away. On December 19, 1973, Mexico, the region's dominant football power, suffers a stunning collapse, losing 4-2-0 to Trinidad and Tobago in the final round of CONCACAF qualifying. Mexico enters the group as the overwhelming favorite, having reached the quarterfinals just 3 years earlier as hosts of the 1970 World Cup. The match, attended by over 30,000 spectators at Stade Silvio Calderón. Because of this defeat, Mexico finishes 2nd in the group and fails to qualify, ceding the 1974 World Cup spot to Haiti, who win all 4 matches in the round. The Mexican press labels the loss una vergüenza nacional, a national embarrassment, and the federation immediately fires head coach. On September 3, 1989, Chile's World Cup dreams implode at the Maracana in Rio de Janeiro after goalkeeper Roberto Rojas fakes an injury to escape a looming elimination. Trailing 1-0 to Brazil in a critical final qualifier, Rojas collapses in the 67th minute, clutching his head as if struck by a flare thrown from the stands. The referee suspends the match, and FIFA launches an investigation within 48 hours. Rojas, then a star with São Paulo FC, later confesses to using a hidden razor blade in his glove to cut himself. The fallout becomes one of the darkest scandals in South American soccer. Because of the deception, FIFA rules the match a 2-0 win for Brazil and bans Chile from the 1994 World Cup, entirely marking a 4-year exile from international competition. Rojas receives a lifetime suspension, as does head coach Orlando Aravena, though both are reduced years later on appeal. In November 2001, Romania's golden era flickers out after a 1-1 draw against Slovenia. In the second leg of their UEFA playoff seals their absence from the 2002 World Cup. VRL Moldovan scores early in but Slovenia, riding momentum from a young Zlatko Zahovic, responds swiftly and holds firm across 90 tense minutes. Romania finishes the match level on aggregate but eliminated on away goals. A second-half injury to Iono Ganea, the team's leading striker with 4 goals in the qualifying campaign, punctures Romania's attacking threat and limits their options late. Critics lament the exclusion of seasoned midfielders and question whether Hegi's early exit to stabilize morale during a crucial campaign. Meanwhile, Slovenia's own golden generation led by Miran and captain Alexander Navs makes history by qualifying for their first-ever World Cup remain. Esla sends a streak of 3 consecutive World Cup appearances and forces a generational reset that lasts well into the 2000s. In October 1993, Canada stands one penalty shootout away from reaching their first World Cup since 1986 but collapses in front of 54,000 fans in Sydney's soccer stadium. After edging out Mexico and El Salvador in CONCACAF's final round, Canada draws Australia 3-3 on aggregate over 2 tense legs. Goalkeeper Craig Forrest, with over 50 caps, keeps Canada alive through extra time. But when the match enters penalties, the pressure crushes them. Striker Alex Bunbury, one of Canada's top scorers in qualifying, misses a crucial attempt, followed by a misfire from veteran forward John The shootout ends 4-1 in Australia's favor, and Canada's World Cup drought stretches another 4 years. Critics highlight the missed chances in the home leg, a 2-1 win in Edmonton where Canada fails to capitalize on a dominant first half. The heartbreak adds to a growing legacy of near misses, as Canada fails to qualify in 1990, 1994, and again in 1998. It would take nearly 3 decades generational reset before Canada would return to the world stage. On November 16, 2005, Uruguay collapses in a penalty shootout against Australia in Sydney, missing out on the 2006 World Cup by the narrowest of margins. The playoff spans 2 legs. Uruguay wins 1-0 at the Estadio Centenario behind a dominant midfield display, only to surrender that lead 4 days later with a 0-1 defeat at the 83,000-seat Telstra Stadium. In front of a roaring home crowd, Marc Bresciano levels the tie with a composed 34th-minute strike. Extra time yields no goals, and the game shifts to penalties, the same high-stakes setting where Uruguay once thrived. Australia's goalkeeper, Mark Schwarzer, capped 109 times, becomes the hero by saving 2, while Uruguayan playmaker Alvaro Recobaden, Inter Milan's prized left foot, squanders multiple chances in open play. As John Aloisi buries the final penalty, Australia qualifies for their first World Cup in 32 years, triggering a seismic celebration. Meanwhile, Uruguay's exit marks a low point in a once-storied tradition. 2-time champions, now missing their 3rd tournament out of 4. Sweden, who finished 3rd at the 1994 World Cup, enter UEFA's 1998 qualifying campaign as dark horses. They returned with much of the same core, except the magic fades fast. In a brutal Group 4, they win just 4 of 10. They lose 1-0 away to Austria and then drop points at home to Latvia in a 1-1 draw. Tomas Brolin, once their midfield maestro, shows up overweight and underpowered. Meanwhile, striker Martin Dahlin suffers a critical injury early in the campaign. Their goal tally, just 15 fewer than Scotland, who topped the group. Because the squad underdelivers, the Swedish press lashes out. They blame Svensson's outdated 4-4-2 system in question. Whether internal politics influenced squad selection, critics highlight how younger talents like Henrik Larsson are sidelined in key matches. The Swedish Football Association stands by Tommy Svensson until the final whistle, but the pressure builds. After finishing 3rd in the group, behind Austria and Scotland, Sweden are eliminated. Svensson resigns days later, closing a chapter that began with a semi-final run and ended in stagnation. Meanwhile, Norway and Denmark surged forward, leaving Sweden to rebuild for Euro 2000. North Korea, who shocked the world by reaching the 1966 World Cup, refused to play a single qualifying match for the 1970 edition. Despite being seeded into the Oceanian zone, they immediately protest FIFA's decision to group them alongside Israel. The ruling regime in Pyongyang refuses to recognize Israel diplomatically and demands a reshuffle. FIFA declines, citing competitive integrity, and North Korea withdraws in protest. Without kicking a ball, the 1966 quarterfinalists are disqualified by default. Their exit marks a rare instance where geopolitics fully overrides performance on the pitch. Because of the boycott, North Korea's remarkable rise from 1966 fades into myth rather than momentum. The team that defeated Italy and nearly stunned Portugal disappears from international football for over a decade. FIFA, wary of political standoffs, later restructures qualifying zones to avoid similar impacts. But the message is clear: football's global stage cannot escape Cold War tensions. In North Korea's absence, Israel advances by default, fueling controversy across the Asian Confederation. This, in turn, triggers a seismic shift. AFC expels Israel in 19, forcing them into referee shaping regional football alliances for decades. Scotland, who qualified for 5 straight World Cups between 1974 and 1990, see their streak collapse in the 1994 U.S. In Group 1, they finish 4th behind Italy, Switzerland, and Portugal, earning just 11 points from 10 games. The turning point comes early. A goalless draw against Estonia, then a 5-0 thrashing in Lisbon. Ali McCoist, their all-time top scorer with 19 goals at the time, spends most of the campaign injured. Meanwhile, Mo Johnston, with 38 caps and 14 goals, retires just as the squad needs experience up front. They score only 10 goals across the entire qualifying cycle, less than Estonia and Malta combined. Because Scotland falter on the pitch, scrutiny intensifies often. The Scottish FA faces backlash for its stagnant player development and failure to modernize tactics. Manager Andy Roxburgh, who helped lead them to Italia '90, is blamed for clinging to aging stars while ignoring youth talent like John Collins and Gary McAllister. As the campaign unravels, confidence drains from the dressing room. For the first time since 1970, Scotland miss a World Cup entirely. Their absence from USA '94 feels symbolic. Britain's footballing map begins to tilt toward England's Premier League boom. And as England also fails to qualify, UEFA's elite begin planning reforms to avoid another ratings disaster. On February 28, jointly suspend all Russian national teams and clubs from international competition. At the time, Russia sits second in Group H of UEFA qualifying, behind Croatia, with 22 points from 10 matches. They earn a playoff spot and are scheduled to face Poland in March. But following global outcry and diplomatic pressure, FIFA removes them from the bracket entirely. Poland advances to the playoff final via walkover, while Russia's World Cup path vanishes overnight. The decision bypasses sporting merit, marking one of the most dramatic disqualifications in modern qualifying history. Because the ruling is politically driven, Russian players, many of them in peak form, never receive a chance to compete. Artem Juba, who scored 30 goals and 55 caps, publicly steps away from the national team amid rising tensions. Alexander Golovin, the Monaco playmaker with 48 caps, loses a rare shot at returning to the World Cup stage. Inside Russia, the move is seen as collective punishment. Outside, it's framed as a necessary stand against war. For the first time since 1994, Russia or any Soviet successor misses out due to forces entirely beyond football. Meanwhile, Ukraine's own qualifying campaign becomes a symbol of resilience, culminating in a playoff showdown that captivates global audiences. Costa Rica, who stunned the world by reaching the round of 16 in 1990, crash out of the 1998 CONCACAF hexagonal after a disjointed and error-ridden campaign. They concede 23 goals and 10 matches, second worst in the group, and finish 4th behind Mexico, the U.S., and Jamaica. The low point comes in a 5-2 loss to the U.S. in Portland, followed by a 3-0 shutout at the Despite fielding veteran forwards like Medford and Rolando, the team scores just 13 goals and collapses defensively against every top-tier opponent. Their goal difference of -10 reflects a squad caught between two generations with no cohesive tactical identity. Because of the poor results, fans and press alike turn on coach Velliber, who previously led Mexico and the U.S. to World Cup knockouts. His conservative, outdated system fails to adapt to the pace of a rapidly modernizing CONCACAF field. Younger talents like Paulo Wanchope are sidelined or underutilized, while loyalty to older players weakens midfield transitions. The national frustration spills into domestic league stands, where supporters of Alajuelense and Saprissa channel their disappointment through intense club rivalries. Costa Rica, as failure to return to the World Cup after 1990 feels less like a stumble and more like a warning shot. Meanwhile, Jamaica's historic qualification electrifies the region and sets a new bar for smaller federations across countries. In May 1992, as were tears through the Balkans, the United Nations imposes sanctions on the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Within weeks, UEFA expels Yugoslavia from Euro 1990, due to Spa, the team having already qualified ahead of Denmark. That same summer, FIFA follows suit, banning the nation from the 1994 World Cup. The punishment freezes a generation of elite talent at the exact moment they reach maturity. Dejan Savivi, the AC Milan playmaker, with 56 caps, Sinisa Mihajovic, the free-kick maestro, and Drogan, captain, and No. 10 with over 80 appearances, all lose their prime years on the global stage. The FIFA World Rankings, introduced in August 1993, keep Yugoslavia in limbo and moving, and because of the ban, Yugoslavia's golden generation splinters into future nations. Croatia emerges first, powered by Zvonimir Boban and Dvorak, and reaches the 1998 World Cup. Serbia and Montenegro begin separate campaigns by the early 2000s, eventually producing stars like Nemanja Vidic and Branislav. Yet the psychological toll lingers. Players born in one country suddenly wear different crests. What could have been a top 4 World Cup threat collapses into geopolitical debris. Meanwhile, Denmark, who replaced Yugoslavia in Euro 1992, shocked Europe by winning the tournament, rewriting history in the space of 3 weeks.